So hello guys, and welcome to another first impressions video. And wow, Tears of the Kingdom is excellent. Honestly, this might end up being one of my favorite games of all time, or my new favorite game of all time. Like, this might top Breath of the Wild. And I feel like it's definitely on track to, for a lot of different reasons. Like, this game just has so much to offer, and the exploration element from Breath of the Wild is just ramped up to 100, and I'll get to that in a little bit. And I feel like it does start off slow, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because the tutorial element of the Great Sky Island, which is basically the Great Plateau equivalent in this game, I feel like it actually does a pretty good job teaching you the different things you need to learn in this game, while also offering kind of like a little bit of exploration at the beginning. I feel like it's actually better than the Great Plateau. I feel like it's a little bigger than the Great Plateau in area, and I feel like it teaches you a lot of these elements better. Because these elements are more in depth than the runes in Breath of the Wild. I know I was like, it's kind of weird, like, not having certain runes, because I was so used to having them, as well as, like, the champion abilities. Like, I feel like it was kind of weird, like, not getting around and spamming Rivali's Gale everywhere. But I mean, I guess I can appreciate, like, a lot of the landscapes that this game has to offer when I don't, like, use Rivali's Gale everywhere. And I think there's a few reasons why, there isn't, like, a thing or equivalent of, like, those champion abilities. Because I feel like all of the abilities that you get, through, like, the Zonai arm that Link has, I feel like they're very different from the abilities that you have in Breath of the Wild, and are very distinct from anything else in Zelda. And they definitely make for some very interesting puzzles. Like, a lot of the shrines that I've been to have been really interesting. And, like, on the topic of shrines, like, I feel like they're actually, like, better than the ones in Breath of the Wild. I mean, it might seem like, it's a rehash of Breath of the Wild, there's shrines again, but the shrines aren't really the same. They, like, all have a different aesthetic from Breath of the Wild, and I feel like the puzzles are a lot different, and I feel like I kind of like the puzzles here better, because I kind of like the new mechanics in Tears of the Kingdom, and everything, how they play out in these different puzzles. Like, you can move something around with Ultra Hand, and then use the recall ability. And yeah, I really like these puzzles in the shrines. I haven't gotten to any of the dungeons yet, but I've just really been enjoying these shrines and everything, and I feel like the visual cues that the shrines have are pretty interesting. Like, they have like this blue, like a kind of like a bluish green spiral coming up from it. So, and then they don't emit that light anymore once you complete the shrine, to kind of let you know that you've already done that. So yeah, I really like how the shrines are implemented, and then on top of that, yeah, the abilities in the game are great, and like I said, they're very distinct. And like with Ultra Hand, I feel like there's a lot of opportunities for different things in the game, like making different vehicles, which is pretty fun. I experimented around with that for a little bit, and also like moving stuff around in a similar fashion to Magnesis, but on a much larger scale. It's basically like moving stuff around with Ultra Hand is basically like Magnesis, but like way better and way more flexible with what you can do with it. And like with Recall, I think that's pretty cool. I feel like I said, Recall makes for some really interesting puzzles, and also just kind of adds to like the scope of the game in general. And then with Ascend, sometimes I forget I have that ability. I mean, that's the one that I don't really use as often. But I mean, it still technically is important, because I have used it for some puzzles in some areas. And then with Fuse, Fuse is just as important as Ultra Hand, with how you can basically fuse things to your weapons or your arrows, and that has made the combat really interesting. Like, the combat in this game is excellent. It's really fun. I mean, it may get a little frustrating at times, because I feel like the enemies in this game have definitely ramped up in difficulty a little bit, which I think is fine, because it definitely compensates for the new abilities that you have in this game. But using Fuse is just really cool, and also the enemies use it as well. Some of the enemies with weapons kind of fuse things together, and I feel like it makes for some very engaging combat, and it's just really fun overall. And like with combat, there's also more enemy variety, which is one of my nitpicks with Breath of the Wild. Like Breath of the Wild, I feel like it didn't really have as many enemies as like some other games, or I guess some other Zelda games. But Tears of the Kingdom, there's a lot of variety here. Like not just with like the standard enemies getting different variations. Like there's a ton of new enemies here, and also a lot of the classic returning Zelda enemies. Like for example, there's the like, which is the one that can kind of like swallow you and steal your stuff. And it's kind of like a weird looking thing, kind of gross looking, but I think it's pretty cool that they added that there. And there's definitely some strategy to killing them. There's also different variants as well, since I ran into like a rock like that like shoots rocks at you, which was kind of difficult to encounter because it like it kept spamming rocks at me. But yeah, there's also like trees that go after you. It's crazy. There's so many enemies, and there was like one time where I also ran into this one enemy with like this malice type stuff with like these hands with eyes that kept going after me. Like it was pretty creepy, but it's just really, really cool. Like how there's like a ton of variety here with the enemies. Like I feel like that's definitely a huge upgrade from Breath of the Wild. Like Breath of the Wild already had great combat, but Tears of the Kingdom definitely improves it a lot. And with the world in general, like at first it might seem like a rehash of Breath of the Wild. Like a lot of the things are very similar and some of the things are basically the same. But I feel like the base level with the world doesn't really feel exactly the same as Breath of the Wild. They've made a lot of changes here, and I feel like they still made it interesting to explore. Like, they changed it just to the perfect level, to where you want to explore different things. Like, it's like the base world of Hyrule is the same, but it's not the same at the same time. It doesn't really feel like a rehash. And I feel like it definitely feels interesting to explore overall. It definitely doesn't feel like $70 DLC. Like, with the new mechanics that you have, it makes it feel very distinct and definitely worth exploring, and it doesn't really feel like you're doing it again. I mean, sure, you'll recognize an area, but then there's also areas that you won't recognize. Like, when I was going into the Kakariko Village area, like, it seemed like there were less trees, and then there were also these ruins, like these ring ruins that kind of fell out of the sky that made the area look very different. For some reason at first, at the angle that I was kind of going into the town in, it kind of looked like, the Kakariko village was like in ruins or it got destroyed, but thankfully it wasn't. It's still there. But that area looked very visually different than it did in Breath of the Wild. And like when I first landed in Hyrule Field, it kind of seemed like substantially different. Like it seemed like some of the placements for like the trees and various structures, especially the enemy structures. I feel like the enemy structures are mostly in different places this time. And there's also like many different types of enemy structures as well. Like in Breath of the Wild, you had like the skulls and the tree top things. I mean, those do return in Tears of the Kingdom, but I feel like there's even more here than there were in Breath of the Wild. But yeah, the world is just very interesting, and I would say it's distinct enough from Breath of the Wild, even though it basically uses the same basic, like, template, kind of. it still feels different, and it still is definitely worth playing again if you've played Breath of the Wild. Like, I wouldn't say that's really bringing the game down at all. Like, it kind of makes sense that the game would take place in the same world as Breath of the Wild, considering the fact that it's a sequel. But they've made enough changes to where it doesn't feel the same. Like, it's still worth exploring and kind of finding different things. And yeah, like in the world, like they added different things such as like caves and the towers and different things. And the caves are really interesting. I haven't found any of the huge underground caves yet, but some of the smaller caves that I found are really cool. And it's really cool that you could stumble upon these little caves, like in different parts of the world. Like they're basically hidden in like every hill. And it's just really fun to kind of go through some of these. Like, yeah, it just adds to the overall exploration here. Like, there's so many things to do. And, like, whenever I see, like a shrine or a tower, a Korok, a cave, just, like, I keep forgetting about the main mission and just keep going off and trying to find these little things. It's like Breath of the Wild, but, like, amplified by 100. And it's just so satisfying to find like all of these secrets and different things scattered throughout the world. It's just really fun, and it kind of takes me back to my first playthrough of Breath of the Wild. Like, I'm kind of getting the same feelings here, but it still feels new. Like in this game, it doesn't feel exactly the same as Breath of the Wild. It feels like a new experience with all of the new mechanics that you have and a lot of the changes that they've made to the core of the game. And another element that they've added to like the worlds as well, I know I keep going on and on about it, but they've added like these new towers. And the towers this time have, even the towers, something as small as the, I know it's not really that small of a thing, but like in Breath of the Wild, I mean, they were just kind of like a thing that was there. You kind of climbed up, maybe deal with some enemies or malice at the base of the tower. But no, this time, it's actually way more interesting than that. All the towers that I've been to so far have had some kind of mission or gimmick behind it. Like in one tower, I had to kind of go underground and then use the ascend ability to go up into the tower because like the doors were kind of blocked off by like sticks that were holding it shut. Then another one, I had to attach this splash fruit to my arrows and then get rid of this gunk like it was Super Mario Sunshine. And also did a little side quest as well where I saved Azora. But yeah, it's like there's so many things to do here. Like in the towers are just really interesting. And I'm glad there's like a mission behind each one of them. Like it just adds to the game overall. There's like so many things to do here. Like it almost makes Breath of the Wild feel like almost a little bland in how its world was. I mean, I know it's not bland. It's still an excellent game, even with Tears of the Kingdom out. But Tears of the Kingdom, I feel like it almost blows Breath of the Wild out of the water in terms of the amount of things you can do in the game. It's crazy. Like, like I said, it's taking me a while to get into the main missions and everything, but yeah, just exploring this world is amazing. And I haven't even touched on the Sky Islands yet. That's a whole other thing that I haven't even discussed yet. That's a pretty major part of this game. But the Sky Islands are great. They add like a whole other map onto it. I mean, obviously they aren't as big as like the ground level in terms of like surface area. But there still is a lot to do in the Sky Islands, and I feel like there's a lot of interesting puzzles there to do as well. Like, traversing them is just really interesting. There's a lot of interesting things you can do. Like, for example, on one of them, I used, like, Ultra Hand to spin this model around, which kind of moved around this big, platform to kind of go in between these islands. And I had to find some like creative ways of like moving around these items or islands by like launching myself off of these like platforms like with like a thing that kind of shoots you into the air, just kind of like gliding around, moving platforms around. It's really fun to move around these sky islands. Like, it's like Breath of the Wild exploration, or I guess Tears of the Kingdom as well, with that exploration element of both of these games, combined with the puzzle elements that you would normally see in shrines and dungeons. And it's excellent. It's just really fun to explore in this game. And yeah, overall, I'm really enjoying it. I don't want to discuss the story because I feel like that might be too spoiler heavy. So I just kind of wanted to discuss the gameplay in my first impressions video here. But yeah, it's an excellent game. And this might end up being my favorite game of all time. Like, so far, I definitely recommend it, even if you've played Breath of the Wild. So anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. And make sure to check out my Discord server if you want to. Goodbye.